what is the biggest thing you want to accomplish within the next 5 years on the line of success and idolizing Elon Musk?
I mean, that's, be careful with that. But yeah, let's see. So the next 5 years, so obviously I'm still kind of early in my career. I just started working at Google. So my biggest goal right now is learning, right? I think to really make a change in the world, first I have to really truly understand it. So that means that every day at work I try to learn as much as possible, and I'm in a great position to do so, right? Beyond that, I think starting to keep working on the kinds of projects that I do see have the greatest potential for that impact and innovation. And what I'm working on now, I definitely think has potential.
Are you allowed to talk about it?
I probably can't go in much detail, but I'll say that, let's see, what can I say?
It's okay if you can't say anything at all.
I get
NDAs.
I'll leave it at that. I think I'll just say being at Google puts me in a unique position to have the scale that I want and the resources that can enable that innovation as well.
So what's one of the biggest roadblocks towards innovation, towards the future of AI everywhere and soft robots?
Yeah, I think so. I've had conversations before with other engineers where we talk about like this sigmoid curve, right? Like if you try to plot innovation, whenever a new technique is developed, like let's say like convolutions in deep learning or maybe transformer models, there's this burst of innovation and so many new things get developed. So that's kind of the upwards part of the sigmoid curve. And then after a certain point, we kind of get to the edge of what we can accomplish with a certain idea or technique. Like there's only so much we can keep refining it to have this innovation, right? And so it kind of flattens out after a bit. So I feel like in some ways we are at that point, especially with deep learning. Obviously, with the transformer model coming out, now it's another huge kind of upward stick.
But didn't that come out about a year ago?
Yeah, that's true. And we are getting kind of maybe near the plateau of that. So when you say like roadblocks in innovation, at least on a personal level, I wanted to try to help start the next kind of start in the sigmoid, right? And that's obviously extremely difficult and requires a lot of creativity. But I think that's the most important thing. Like if we want to really be innovative, we have to keep thinking of new ideas. We can't just keep refining what we have before.
I mean, I know like previously AI and machine learning papers were coming out really frequently, especially when things started becoming open source with TensorFlow and everyone was coming up with all these new neural nets. And then transformers came out about a year ago, and it's kind of been quiet during the pandemic other than like FFTs being applied to models in a new way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it also depends on like the specific field. Like, I don't know if you watched Google I.O. Recently, but they unveiled, I think they're calling them Lambda nets. And there's a lot of, I mean, it still relies on the transformer kind of basis from as far as I understand. But the innovation there has been pretty impressive from what I've seen. I think a lot of it now is that we can't just apply transformers to unsupervised data and expect them to be perfect because they're going to start making things up, right? I guess it goes back to the truth, like what is truth, right? How do we make these models ground to some sort of knowledge graph or some sort of truth, right? And I think a lot of people are working on that right now, and we're getting closer and closer to having some really impressive, intelligent, let's say, AI that we could really converse with.
And I mean, I have a Google Dot at home. We regularly talk to it, but she gets a lot of stuff wrong.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement there, at least from my experience.
But that sounds very promising. Where do you see all this technology going towards the Lambda nets and everything? You see it being better at talking, being better at NLP, being better at computer vision.
Yeah. I think the core problem at the heart of AI is how do we unlock reasoning, right? We're pretty good now at creating machine learning models that can recognize patterns, even really complex patterns. But, I've seen certain papers that claim like, oh, maybe convnets, only really look at textures and not really the shapes, right? So, that's a little bit easier of a pattern to recognize. So where I'm going with this is more like, how do we make models that don't just see patterns in data, but really reason about that data to come to new conclusions?
Or have contextual information that a human picks up.
Exactly. And that goes kind of back to the multimodal stuff. Like how can we can't just use text. We also have to use images, video, so maybe, embodied kind of robotics kind of stuff. As much information as we can throw in there that an AI can make those logical connections.
What about empathy?
Empathy. That's interesting. It's a very human kind of concept. Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one thing that machine learning is going to be lacking if they're going to try to surpass human intelligence, or will definitely be necessary if we want to let it run unobstructed throughout our society, is that it needs to possess empathy like a human. Mm-hmm. You don't want something with an IQ of 1,000 running around.
Yeah, I mean, I still think we're pretty far from that point, personally. There's a lot of very smart people who can probably talk much more in depth on this topic. But from what I've picked up on, there's a lot of things we can do to, as AI gets smarter, right? There's a lot of things we can do to make it align with our goals. Mm-hmm. And then there's a kind of the classic idea of like, we have a robot that like, I tell the robot, make a paperclip, right? And then it turns the whole world into paperclips if it's, super intelligent. So I think one of the big problems is aligning, basically like being able to write down what our objectives are as humans, right? And maybe that's not something we can do. Maybe we can't tell a robot, achieve this goal, but, don't hurt humans, or don't do, like, there may be a point where the robot gets around that, or the AI gets around that. So I've heard of concepts of, trying to make AI figure out what is important to humans. And maybe that is empathy, right? Can an AI analyze human behavior and try to determine, the moral kind of laws and kind of the objectives that a human might have, and then try to take those into account when achieving, something that we want the AI to do, right? So there's room for improvement there.
It makes me kind of think of microexpression reading. It's really easy to do with a computer and computer vision.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of humans miss microexpressions on other humans. But usually we like try to cover it up like disgust or something. If someone says something inappropriate and we're like, oh, yes, everything is fine. And we hide the disgust, but a computer would see that. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of is an interesting view into the soul that a computer gets that most humans miss. So
yeah, humans are very flawed in many ways, right? Like maybe AI can actually help us communicate with each other even more effectively, like read us even more effectively than another human could.
One idea along the lines of like Neuralink, and there's actually quite a few versions of Neuralink out right now in the space doing a lot of research, and they are thinking about being able to merge two human brains. So if you will, you could merge your brain with your girlfriend and you could hear all her thoughts unfiltered. Is that something that that's a human machine interface, but like also you're interfacing with another human. What happens when we combine two human brains?
Yeah, that is the way. I don't really know what would happen, but that is the way that we've kind of been progressing in a way, right? I don't know if this is the exact way that Elon thinks about it, but the way I have interpreted is that, as the technology has developed, we've increased the bandwidth of information flow from our brains to a computer, right? Maybe we started with punch cards and that was too slow. So we have keyboards. That was too slow. So now we have like voice and like smartphones in our pockets, and we can like access it as quickly and efficiently and as high bandwidth as possible. We can put as much information into a computer, right? And with each other as well, I guess, with the internet and whatnot. So it seems like a natural evolution, right? Mm-hmm. But I think we'll have to have a slow progression there, because I don't think society could handle just like immediate, brain to brain communication.
I mean, like everyone has thoughts that they think that they don't want their significant other to know, probably. Yeah. So that would be my biggest fear, is like, oh, this dinner's really gross. Oh, it's great, honey. Thank you so much. Those things in that kind of space. And the normal level of privacy that we're used to, at least inside of our own head.
But think about privacy maybe, like let's say 50 years ago, right? Before the internet. I mean, I can't speak too well on how it was back then, but my understanding is like people, compared to now, people would be very private, right? Like now you can know immediately exactly where all your friends are located, right? Like what they're doing, what food they've eaten, right? Like,
look here's a picture.
Exactly. So that's kind of normal now. So maybe it does seem a bit strange to us, like, oh, it'd be so, there's no privacy there, right? But I don't know, maybe that's just how human civilization is developing. Like privacy is becoming less and less, or maybe different in some way, right?
I mean, I would argue that even though we've kind of reduced the amount of privacy and I can see what you had for dinner, we've decreased the amount of community involvement. So in the 19, I don't know, whatevers, there was a lot more sense of community. You knew your neighbors' names and stuff like that. I mean, I've lived in my home for a couple of years and I've said hi to my neighbors a handful of times and tried to invite them over for barbecue and stuff and be community. But I would say like the decrease in privacy has like gone the opposite way as far as like we don't have a sense of community as much as we did previously.
Or at least like local communities.
Yes.
Right? Because globally, I would say we're more connected globally than ever, right?
And probably with people that share more similar ideas.
Yeah.
Because you can be selective and say you have the exact same, ideas that I have and I would like to communicate with you so we can come up with more crazy ideas.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, yeah, of course, social media, there's a lot of stuff that we need to improve there. But I don't know, I'm optimistic. I'm kind of, I guess, a technologist where I could say, maybe it's all that we need is a revolutionary new tech idea that helps not only create global communities, but local communities, right? I'm sure there's people who've attempted kind of like more local social media, right? Like that must be something, right?
I mean, there's this girl that does this podcast that interviews local Boise techies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
You might know about her. Her name's Sarah in Tech. She also runs a meetup for data scientists in Boise.
There we go.
Trying to create community, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for listening to Sarah in Tech. Feel free to email me at sarah@sarahintech.net or follow me on Instagram @sarahintech. Hope you enjoyed listening.